of applications, applications that are used inside other things that we call embedded systems. So writing code for cars and aeroplanes and things like those. That's a whole different session. But for today, we'll just get you into the world of programming using this. Before we get started, I want us to talk a little bit about something called an environment. An environment, when it comes to programming, is the creation of literally an environment. When we talk about coding, we have different ways that a computer understands what we call languages. And as you can see on the screen, the input, which we call instructions, are given in very specific languages. Languages have very different applications. There are languages that are very good for writing websites. There are languages that are good for writing mobile apps. There are languages that are used for writing networking tools. But as soon as we give the instructions to the computer, it has a way of understanding what we're telling it, and then it will give us value. This could be in data, insights, other programs. It could be in revenue value for companies. It could be in very different sorts of ways of value that we get from the instructions that we give computers. Now, environments are kind of spaces in which languages are able to be understood. Now, let me give you a real world example for you to understand what I mean by environments. I hear in Nigeria that there's a very interesting called Pidgin English. Am I correct? Enoch, am I correct?
100, bro.
So for you to understand Pidgin English, you have to understand, first of all, a version of English, and then also the Pidgin version of it. In that same construct of you understanding a new language, let's say French or Swahili or Portuguese, you need to create an environment in your brain that understands that this is not English, but this is Portuguese. This is Portuguese, but not Swahili. This is Swahili, but not Pidgin English. In the same way, computers have a sort of memory understanding of the kinds of languages that we give them. So we create environments inside of the computers. Anytime we give it instructions in a different language, it's able to decipher which language it is and what to do about the instructions that it has been given. So again, if you do have any questions, I'll try to pose as much as possible just to take in any questions. Please make sure that they're on the chat. If you don't understand anything, I'm more than happy to reiterate. So in essence, that is what programming is, or what some would call coding. It's giving instructions to a computer in a very specific manner, and then getting value from those instructions. As I said, today we'll be focusing on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We'll start off with HTML and then work our way to JavaScript at the end of the coding session. HTML is what you'd call a markup language. Markup language is a language just used to present things, right? To present text, images, color, animations, anything that you see, regardless of how well it's put or not put on a page. HTML is mostly responsible for that on the internet, right? So it's a presentation language. It doesn't do any logic or anything of some sorts. I'm curious to know if anyone knows any other markup language that they've interacted with or they've had before. Is there anyone who can contribute on the chat? So if you've heard of any markup language in your lifetime. Okay, good. Yes, that's correct, Nazif. XML is also another good contribution. Dismas, thank you. Language, yes, it is, but it's not a markup language. So I like the two contributions of LaTeX and XML. We also have Markdown, which is a very widespread markup language. And again, as I said, their job is just to display, right? Just to display on the screen. With HTML, what I mean by semantic is that HTML is built out of tags, as we can see on the screen. HTML is built out of tag, content within the tag, and then a closing tag. So up here we have our opening tag, content, and our closing tag. That's literally the syntax of writing anything that has to do with HTML. And it's built out of very many different tags. So I want us to go back to our Visual Studio Code that we have downloaded. So again, you should see something like this. And I want us to understand what I mean by HTML is a language that's built out of tags, and the content that lives inside the tags, and how different tags are in HTML. So please follow along with me. So what I'll do here is I will just quickly make a folder. So please code along with me. I hope people can see what I'm doing.
Hi, Andrew.
Yeah.
So we have someone who has had his hand raised for a while.
Okay.
Mohammed, I don't know whether you have a question or clarification for Andrew. That's Aliyu Mohammed. Okay, maybe he'll type it out in the chat box, but I'll be stopping you as the session continues.
No problem. Okay, so I'll just quickly make a sort of project folder that we're going to use for this session today. Let's make a new folder, and I will call it coding session. Okay. Within this folder, I will create a file that is called an index.html file, and I'll also put my CSS and JavaScript. But I think I will do that a lot better from Visual Studio Code. So go back to Visual, then open up my folder that I had. So I'll open a folder. Nancy, please let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, I can. So there's been a question addressed, I think, privately to us. How does someone write HTML?
Right.
So first of all, probably explain the text editor, the folder you're creating, and how to write the first line.
Okay. So there are a lot of things I'll do during this session that I might not explain beforehand, but I'll kind of do something and then explain it or reiterate back when I'm done. I'll make sure to go back into the things that people don't understand. So we're just about to write HTML for the person who's called Nancy. Please change your name. We're just about to dive into what HTML is and how to navigate it. Okay, so I have my coding session folder here. What I'll do is I'll just click on this icon to make a new file, and I'll call this file index.html. Okay, meaning that it's a file called index. It's a HTML file called index. And ideally, this is where we'll write all our index.html. Okay, so please make sure that you're following along. Maybe put the call on one side and then your editor on the other side of your screen, but make sure that you're following along with me. So as I said, HTML is a presentation language, a markup language, used to only just show text and images and visuals. We also say that HTML is built up of a lot of tags, okay? There are some defining tags that we need to put in our HTML page so that we can see the content that we're putting down on our page on the browser. So I will start by just, let me just remove that. I'll start by typing out a couple of lines of code, and then I'll just walk back and explain them. Okay. So this is the basic structure of a HTML document. We can see the tag has the opening and closing angle brackets that are used for most tags. So the fast tag, if I can just isolate it a little bit, the fast tag, I want to explain the meaning of this tag. This tag, number one, the document is a HTML document, but not only that, it also tells the browser what version of HTML we're using, which is currently HTML5, okay? You might not see something saying HTML5 in the tag, but the browser understands that once I see the doc type with the exclamation mark at the start and HTML at the end, it means that it is a HTML5 document. I'll also remove this. I don't think it's necessary. The next tag we have is the head tag, okay? So the head tag is, if I can go back to my browser, we have, I can just show that for the head tag, anything that we see on a tab, for example, here, and some additional information for the browser to understand is wrapped in the head tag. So if we come back to Visual Studio Code, that way we're able to understand what is going to be in the tab of that document. We're going to link our CSS in the head tag. There are a lot of metadata items that are going to be in the head tag. So things that we're not going to see in the page.
Sorry, are you able to zoom in?
Am I able to zoom in? Yes. Is that better? Okay. So as I was saying, there's some tags in the head tag that we're going to put. There's a lot of code that we're going to put here that we're not actually going to see on the page itself, but it's going to tell the browser a little bit more information about the kind of HTML page that we're trying to build. So that's the head tag. After the head tag, we have the body tag. So everything in the body tag is what we will see in the page. And then the HTML end of tag closes kind of, oh, sorry, I think I removed a tag that was supposed to be there, right? So we have a HTML tag that opens the page, and then a HTML tag that closes the page. So the other thing that you'll notice is that most tags have an opening and closing tag. For example, our title, which we will see is on the tab of the page, has an opening tag and a closing tag in that kind of syntax. So if you do look at any HTML page, a lot of it is going to look like this, with just tags, 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 tags. Others have opening and closing, and others have just an opening without a closing tag. So I want us to kind of just view this thing, make sure you have all this typed out in your index.html file. So I want to click here on the Explorer. What you're going to do is you're going to go down to copy the path of the file. So I want you to click that, and then I want you to go back to your browser. Okay. Now open a new tab, and then paste that link. You wouldn't see much unless you focus on, if you focus on up here where the tab, you can see the word document. I'm trying to I'm trying to put it as full screen because I think the meeting controls are kind of, there we go. Okay, so you can see the word document up here, right? And if you go back to our Visual Studio Code, we can kind of understand that that is what we put in the heads tag. Sorry, guys, I'm trying to navigate Zoom. Nancy, do me a favor. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
So we're seeing the document tab right now.
Okay. For some reason, I've lost all host controls for switching.
Let me just fix that. You should be okay now.
Okay. Sorry, guys, just give me 1 minute.
As Andrew fixes that, for those of you who are just joining us, if you missed the initial sections, this meeting is being recorded, so you will be able to follow through, but you haven't missed that much. We were just starting off on the HTML section. We'll also be sharing this recording after, so you'll be able to look at how Andrew installed the text editor, the file that he used, opening tags, closing tags, all this that he's covered so far. You'll be able to get this and then you can be able to try as you code. Yes, we will share the recording with you as well as the steps that you need to follow in order to create these basic tags. So
I think I'm back.
Okay, so you can
Thanks,
just
Nancy.
speak up. I was letting everyone know that this will be shared after because there's some guys who joined later and they're
Okay.
concerned that they won't be able to actually code.
All right, no problem. So as I said, HTML has a structure of opening and closing tags. We've been able to see that, for example, if we change this to Andrew and go back to our page and make sure we save. So save that and then reload the page. You could see at the top, it changes the document title right at the tab to Andrew. So this is just to show that there are some tags in the HTML that might not necessarily change things on the page or any information on the page, but they do have some behind the scenes use. So I'll ask you just to, put in your name in the title and then say personal website. Okay. You can have Andrew's personal website right here, and then we'll talk more about the rest of the tags. Now, one thing to note is that there are some tags in HTML that need a little bit more specificity. Okay. We need to have some more information that's added to the tag just to give it something to tell us or some information to tell us. So we'll have our tag name and then an attribute and a value. So an example of this would be if we're trying to link our HTML page to another HTML page. So right in our Explorer, I'll ask you to just add another HTML page, call it about.html, okay? And we'll do the same thing that we have in index. So you can just copy everything in index.html, go to about.html, and paste it. Okay. Now we want to make a tag, or we want to make something that links index.html to about.html. So we want people to be able to see our landing page and then go to another page that talks a little bit about ourselves. We'll change the title here and just say about Andrew. So you can also put about your name, okay? Now, the tag that we use, remember, in our body section to link one page to another is called the anchor tag. So you can just press A and tab, or you can type this out. You'll see that we have, this is one of the tags that has an opening, it has an attribute with a value that it takes, and a closing anchor tag. So I will type in here about me. Okay, so I'm just making sure that everyone, I'm trying to move as slowly as possible to make sure everyone is on the same page. So as we said, we have our anchor tag, and it has an attribute because some tags in HTML take an attribute with a value. And then within that, we have our content, and then we come back to our closing anchor tag. So if we just view that, what that looks like on our website. So if we go back to Chrome and we reload the page, we can see that we have a link that says about me. However, when we click on it, it doesn't necessarily take us to the about me page. However, we can see that it is a link. Sorry, was that a question from someone? Okay. So I'll go back to the code and make our page a little bit more realistic. So what we'll come and do is we'll come to the about page. We will have a H1 tag. So we have H1 opening, H1 closing. All right, I'm going to mute attendee number 1. If you do have a question, please post it in the chat. And then I'll write my name, Andrew Nampu, and then I will have a paragraph tag and say, this page sums up a little about me. Okay. So ideally, people should see my name, a little bit about me, and then I'll also include another anchor tag that links back to our HTML page. Now, for me to link back, all I have to do is add index.html in the sort of the value between these two quotes, double quotes, add index.html, and it should link me back to index. I will come back to index.html and also do just something a little bit small. This is my personal website. And then I'll have another p tag that says learn more about me. Okay. So when people, make sure you save both of these pages. So I'm just Control S. So when people land on my website, so this is a paragraph tag with opening and closing, an anchor tag that we can use to link one page to another. And then we can see how that works. So we'll go back to our website online. We'll reload the page and we can see that the content has changed. Remember, the content has not been styled. We'll get to styling, but we said HTML just presents information using tags. So if I click the About Me, this takes me to my about page. I don't think I saved, so let me just quickly save my page. So you can say back home. All right, so I can go back home and then I can go to the About Me section. Can kind of navigate through the pages. So I just want to recap some of the things that we've done. We've said HTML is pretty much built out of the tags, right? Tags represent different things that we can put on the page. Could put text, images, pretty much anything. And then we can use the tag to kind of semantically tell the page what to present, okay? Then within the tag comes our content. I kind of want us to try an image. So I will just open another tab. And then I will look for Formula One car. Okay. I'll open up the images. This looks like Lewis's car, so I'll just save that image. Make sure I save it in my project folder. Please make sure you're following along.
My internet is not a fair number. Not a fair number.
Sorry.
Andrew, we lost you for a second.
Is muted. I don't think they have a mic, Nancy. Mic check, Nancy.
We lost you for a second. I think your internet had frozen for like 30 seconds. I think we've lost Andrew for just a second, but as he gets his connection back, I just want to do a pulse check. How many of you are following through? Do you have any questions? You can drop them in the chat box. But I'm just curious to know if there's anyone who's installed the text editor and is following through on their end, or they've managed to write the basic HTML tags. So I can see it's hard for me to tell those who are labeled as Nancy Momani. So please rename. So I can see Elvis is following through, Elvis Gisharu, Joku, Elaine following through here. Dismas, is it okay if I ask you to unmute to just share so far how it is for you?
Nancy, just a mic check that you can hear me.
Yes. So just asking the attendees how they're following through. So some actually had installed VS Code ahead of time. So they're able to coordinate as you're presenting.
All right. Someone says I'm moving a little bit too fast. So you can just
someone who actually would want you to. Okay, I think it's confusing for those who don't have a text editor, but we'll share this recording afterwards.
Right. As I said, I'll put my video off just to make sure my bandwidth is dedicated to the presentation. So for those who are joining us, we're just finishing up something very quickly, and then we'll have a quick recap as we move on to CSS. So as I think I lost people when I downloaded an image into my project. So for those who are following on, please make sure you have some sort of image, just drop it onto your folder. I have something called car.jpg, which is a Formula One car. And just to visually represent this in a folder structure, so you just drop any image that you have here. Make sure it's very easy to read out. It has a very easy name, just so that the coding isn't too heavy on you. Okay, so getting back to our Studio. Again, for those who are following through, make sure you're using Visual Studio Code. You can use any other text editor that you'd like, but for this session, we'll be using Visual Studio. This is what we use to write code in very different languages and environments, as we talked about a few minutes ago. So I'm going to go back to my about.html, and just in the spirit of us understanding that HTML is literally a language that is built off of closing and opening tags, I want to link an image here. So I will just have another p tag. So opening paragraph, closing paragraph tag, and I will say, I like to watch F1. Okay. Now under this, I want to place the image of this car that I have in my project. And what I'll do is I will use an image tag. Okay. So please make sure you're typing out all this as you can see on the screen. So we have the image tag with a distinction on how it has img at the opening, but you'll notice that the image tag doesn't have a closing tag like what we have in the paragraph. So this means—
Andrew, please zoom in. Sorry for that. Just zoom in a bit.
Okay, right. Nancy, does that work for you?
I think you had zoomed in, then you went back. Just revert to, yes.
Okay. For the people who are attendees, please change your name from Nancy so that I just don't confuse you. Okay, so as I was saying, you'll notice that the image tag, it has its attributes and values, and also another attribute and another value. But you'll notice that it doesn't have a closing tag that like that of a paragraph tag, for example. And there are some elements in HTML that don't need this kind of closing tag to their opening tag. They're kind of what we call self-contained elements. The image is one of them. So the image has two attributes: a source with the acronym SRC and alt. So let me just explain what these two do. So the source is going to point us to where the image is. We'll put just the name of the image file that we want to see. So in this case, we have car.jpg. And then the alt, or alternative text, is should this car not load, this text should be seen. So in the event maybe you have a very low internet connection, or you're not able to load pages, or if you have a disability of not seeing a page, then the on-screen reader can read this for you. So I'll just put here Formula One. Okay. So in any scenario that the page is not, the image is not able to load, then this text will be seen on the page. So I will save that, make sure you're saving. And then I will take it back to our Google Chrome. So I'll just close that. And I will reload the page. So I'll click on About Me and we should see the car. We can go back home. So if you're following up with me, you should have one page that's kind of your landing page where people land in your personal website. And then you have an About Me page that shows some things that you like and maybe a picture or two. So I can see some questions in the chat that ask which editor we're using. As I said, we are using Visual Studio Code. However, it is not available on your phone. So if you're viewing this session on your phone, just try to keep up with us and we'll answer any questions that you might have. Okay, so that's pretty much all that has to do when it comes to HTML. As we said, HTML is pretty much a presentation language that we call markup language. It contributes of tags with content in themselves, and each tag has a very distinct opening and a closing tag between the content. There are some tags that are self-containing, so this might not apply to them. And then some tags also have an attribute and a value, as we've seen the image tag. So we need to give the tag a little bit more specificity, a little bit more detail into what it's going to be doing. And we add that in our attribute and our value. So I just want to pause there for any questions, any comments that people might have before we jump into CSS. Nancy, any questions on our chat?
So there was some addressed to us directly. Let me see if there's a new one. There's questions around the text editor, which I think you've already addressed, the VS Code. There's one of you who's labeled as Nancy Momani who would like us to address the questions. I don't know whether you're able to type this out so that we can address it.
Okay, so I see one question around Python Jupyter Notebook. That is a little bit towards our data science side of life. So we'll talk about it as we get to the end of the session. But for this one, we'll be specifically focusing on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. A lot of the things I'll be talking about are very high level. So should you want a little more information on it, we'll give you direction on how you can do that. Okay. So I'll just go back to our slides and we'll talk about, we'll talk about the structure of a HTML page. So as we can see, there are ways in which I've been able to put certain information in my page. We talked about the doc type up here, and we said the doc type, its role is to tell the browser what version of HTML we're using. It ideally should be the latest version of HTML, which is HTML5. The head tag, however, which you can see has a distinct opening head and a closing head tag, houses something that we like to call metadata. And this is information that is useful to the browser, but is not necessarily displayed on the browser. And we'll come to that as we talk about CSS, okay? And then once you close the head tag, you have the body tag in which everything that you're going to see on your page will live inside. So paragraphs, images, articles, lists, anything, colors are going to live within the body tag. And then you have your HTML closing tag. Sorry, I forgot to add my opening HTML tag on this presentation. But that's going to come, no, sorry, actually it is this one, sorry. It is here with the doc type. And we have our closing HTML tag that kind of wraps the whole document into one bucket. So as I said, you define your doc type with the HTML tag. You have your head that has a lot of metadata, things that you're not going to necessarily see on the page, but are useful for the browser. Close your head tag. You have your body tag that houses everything, all the content that you can see on the page. And then you wrap everything in your HTML page. So someone asks, I've come across HTML5 on Visual Basic. Is there any different of tags with the HTML, or are they all the same? I'm not necessarily sure I understand that question, but I will say HTML5 is very similar regardless of which text editor you're using. So some people can use Visual Basic, some people can use Atom, some people can use WebStorm. So regardless of the text editor that you're using or the language that you're using, HTML, the tags will always be the same. For further reading, there's something called JSX, which is JavaScript's extension that has a few HTML tags, but I don't want to get into that right now. We have a question that asks, how does someone who has basic Microsoft Office get fully involved and understand this whole coding stuff? I will get back to you at the end of this session, just to give you some headway with that. So if you've been following through.
Andrew, sorry, I need to interrupt you just a bit. Are you able to take some answers later? So I've gotten a request to drop your LinkedIn profile.
Yes, no problem. All right. So I want us to switch gears into CSS. But before we jump into CSS, for it to make a lot of sense, I want us to kind of change our project folder into this folder structure. Okay. So what I mean is, let's go back to Visual Studio Code. Okay. If I move too fast on this section, please let me know. So here we have our about, we have our index, we have our car, and I want us to move it into this kind of folder structure where we'll have our CSS in one folder, our JavaScript files in one folder, our assets in one folder, and our assets will house all our images. And then we'll have our HTML pages kind of in the root folder. Okay. So let's just do that together. Let's make our CSS folder. So if you want to make a folder, you can click on the new folder icon. We want to make, sorry, that is not correct. So here we want to make another one called JavaScript, and then we want to make one called assets. I don't know if that's how you spell assets. Assets, yeah. So what we'll do is we'll just drag and drop our car into assets, move it there, okay? And then everything else is just nice and good. So in our CSS, click on CSS. Then I want you to click on new file and just make a file called app.css. Okay. So ideally your folder structure should look something like this. You should have index.html, about HTML. You should have a CSS, a JS, and an assets folder, or each of these should be folders. And then inside of the assets, drop all your images. Inside of the CSS, drop your app.css. And inside of JavaScript, I will give further instruction on that. Now, a visual representation of this from the folders is, if you're looking at it, we have our project folder called coding session. We have our assets where we have our car and any other image. We have our CSS that houses our app.css, JavaScript that is empty for now, and then index and about. So that's how your folder structure should look like. I'll pause there just for people to get onto the same page. Okay, so let's talk about CSS. CSS stands for cascading style sheet. HTML, on the other hand, I forgot to ask this, stands for hypertext markup language, which, as we said, is a language that is used for presenting things on the screen. CSS, however, is going to do a lot of the styling. So color, positioning, moving things in the right place, giving things a little bit more visual taste on the page. And I want us just to follow on with this as I move on to CSS. So we'll go back to our Visual Studio Code. Right now, our page looks very bland, if I'm being honest. So if we look at our page, we have this. It's not the most attractive thing. And if we go to About Me, number one, we can see that our page isn't loading, but even when it's not loading, we can see the alternate text that we defined. And bonus points to anyone who can tell us why the page is not loading on the chat. So we want to add some sauce onto this, page. We want to give it some structure. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down to our code editor. Okay, and using CSS, we'll be able to just bring some things to life. So I want us to all go back to our index.html. Okay, now we want to link this page and say that this page will be styled by this file. So this CSS file called app.css is the one that's responsible for styling our HTML page. And we can do that by linking. So just have a link tag, our CSS to our HTML. So as we said, this is one of the tags that is self-containing. We have the link tag. It has a relationship over style sheet. And this is the sort of called the href attribute. And what the href attributes, or href, for some people, is that it links us to the CSS file. So all we have to do is say CSS, app.css, point this link tag to the CSS file. Okay, you do that by saying CSS. So what this means is it says go to the CSS folder and look for this app.css file. Okay. And when we save that, we wouldn't necessarily see an immediate change on our website. If you go back to it, we won't necessarily see an immediate change. But now we can start styling the page itself. Perfect. I love that people are contributing on the chat. So Infinix Hot 5, Nancy, all of you are correct. By saying we changed the location of our image. That's why when we come to the About Me page, we're not able to see the image. However, it's very good practice for us to have this alternate text. So we're just going to do that very quickly. We'll come back to our about.html and we'll say in the assets folder, look for car.jpg and save that. Then when we come back to our page online, we'll able to see our car when we reloaded the page. Okay, we're back. All right, so let's look at the structure of CSS. So CSS has a very simple structure like HTML. So HTML has just a bunch of tags going on that are describing what's happening on the page. For CSS, however, what we need to do is we need to, first of all, target the tag, okay? Target the tag, and then style it using this parentheses. So for example, if I want to target the tag, I will just write the tag name. So let's do about.html. I think this would be give us more variety. So I'll just link my CSS file in the head of the about.html. So remember, this is a link tag. The relationship between this page and the CSS page is that it's a style sheet, and the href or the href is where our style sheet is. So we'll come back to this and then just point to our h1 tag. So we're pointing to this. We want to style this tag, okay? So what I'll do actually is I will wrap all of this.
Andrew, can you zoom in slightly?
Okay, does that work?
So not yet. A couple of guys can't see the screen clearly.
Okay. And now I think that's the largest I can go.
So I think the zooming in and also splitting your screen, because we're seeing this is my personal website. We're not seeing the
Okay.
where you're
Sorry,
coding.
I'm sharing the
Like
wrong thing.
your
I'm
screen
sharing the
shows.
wrong thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry guys. This is what I'm talking about. Right. So what I've done here is I am just putting everything in I've added a section tag because I want to target this section. I want to target all this content that is within the about page. Okay. This is what I want to target, and I want to style it. So what I would do, I'll come back to our app.css, and I will target the section tag. Okay. Now within this curly braces or parentheses, I'll be able to define any kind of styling that I want. Think of any kind of styling, color, text decoration, where the position on the page, any kind of animation. I can actually do that with CSS. So what I want us to do is I want all this content to appear centered on the page. And then I want it to be justified. I'm sure we've all used Microsoft Word. Justified means that the content is centered horizontally and vertically speaking. So we'll do this, please follow along. We will say that we want the section to be displayed as flex. Okay, right? And then we want to justify our content to the center. Then we want to align the items to the center. So what this does, number one, is, as we said, it justifies the content. It moves the content horizontally to the center. Then aligning the items moves it to the center vertically. Okay. And then I want to give this section a height of 100% of the view height. So what this means is this section that I've targeted has 100% of my screen. Okay, 100% of my screen. And then finally, this display. So this display flex tells the section that it's going to be displayed in a flex manner. So I'll just drop some more resources around what flex means and the flex box later on, but for now, just type out display flex. I'll drop some more content or some further reading around that on the chat as we wind up. So we'll just save that. And ideally, this should target our section here. And we will go back to our page. Okay. So this is our landing page. And then if we go to our section page, we can see that everything is kind of in the middle. Right. I'm just going to try and add. Just going to make sure that we can see everything. So it kind of comes in the middle of the page. I want us to now kind of make sure things are not towering over each other to the center. So you can add the width of 100% view width, so that fills the page. And then you can say flex direction, which is column. Okay. So flex direction and display flex are kind of in the same group of further reading of the flex box. So, and this is just trying to style things on the page that I will drop more information on the charts as we wrap up. So if I reload the page, we can see everything just kind of aligns itself to the center, you know. So what I'll just do is back to my video code, right? I will go to index, and then I will also put this in a section. Everything that is on my
Andrew,
index.html.
can you explain the flex section? I think there's someone who's a bit confused.
Right. So before I explain this flex, we've done this same thing for our index.html. Let's go. Reload the page, and we can see everything comes to the middle, the same as the about me page. Display flex. This is a very interesting way of styling our HTML page. I just kind of want to zoom in on both of this. Now, these are attributes that are derived from something called the flexbox way of styling your page. Again, this is a little bit further reading, but what it does, the flexbox, it helps us kind of position content on our page appropriately without having to write too much code. Okay. What the other thing that it really helps us with is also sizing of our page on different mobile screens. I think it's a little bit of further reading for this session. So I think it's a whole session on itself. I'm sure, Nancy, one of our TMs is going to give a Thursday speaker talk about the Flexbox on this. So you can invite everyone on this call, but it's, as a rudimentary understanding, it's just a way for us to position things on our page without having to write too much code. Okay, I will drop further reading material on the Flexbox just so that these 2 lines of code make sense to everyone. But try to overlook them for this session. And then we aligned our content to the center. We aligned our items to the center. So this is positioning things horizontally and vertically on the page. So they're dead smack in the middle. And then we're saying that the sections need a height of 100% view height and a width of 100% view width. So that means that they fill the page. I hope I've been able to scheme through the answer for that, attendee number 1. Okay, So I just want us to take a very quick 2-minute break. I'll just invite Nancy to come in because the next thing that we're going to touch on is JavaScript. So we'll be just diving into everything. So if you have any questions that you think we can answer, if you have any comments that you want, if there are any questions that I can answer, please feel free.
So as we take the break, for those of you who joined us as Andrew had already started, today is just a beginner walkthrough on the fundamentals of programming. We do have classes in software development that I'll talk about at the end of today's session. So follow keenly, and then as we wrap up, I'll share details on how you can join. So everything that he's explaining today, this would be covered in the first part of the course if you take the software development course with Moringa. So yeah, just keep that in mind as he's going through the various sections, and we'll share a recording after today. So thank you guys so much for joining. I think now we're going to move to the last section, which is JavaScript, but you can take a 1-minute breather, and then Andrew, you can pick it up.
Yeah, so just grab some water, stretch out, and then we can come back for JavaScript. For everyone asking about this, the code that we have on this session, I'll try to make it available on GitHub. So I'll send the code to Nancy just so that she can forward it to people, and they can kind of sit with yourselves after this just to go through it. So I think you can reconvene back at 8:14. Is that okay, Nancy?
Yes, it's okay. And then this next section will be very brief. I think we've covered a lot for today.
Okay.
I'm seeing questions around data science. Yes, Moringa does have this course. We have both a full-time and part-time option. We'll also be sharing details on email of how you can join us for the data science courses, but we do have this course. And actually, Andrew is on the data science side, but he also codes. So yeah, looking forward to connecting. That's to Njoku.
Okay, so I think we can all reconvene back. And now we get into kind of the meat in the sandwich, which is JavaScript. I want to explain what the capabilities of JavaScript using the website on the screen, Code and Theory. So we looked at HTML as a presentation language, right? We looked at it as a way we can present things on our screen. And then we saw that CSS can style those same things. But if we want to give some functionality and some animation to what we're building in HTML and CSS, then we can always use JavaScript. Okay, so this is kind of the website that we're looking at today, the Code and Theory website. And we can see so much animation, so much functionality going on. When we scroll down, things are kind of floating in the air. There's so much going on. And a lot of this is you're able to achieve with just CSS and JavaScript. So not only is it very good as a functional programming language, but it also gives a lot of sauce and exciting things to your website. JavaScript is also one of the most widely used languages on the internet, if not the most widely used language. So as soon as you understand JavaScript, you start to understand how a huge part of the internet works. So I want us to dive into that. I want us to dive into JavaScript. So what we're going to look at today is we're going to look at variables, functions, and control structures. And then should we have time, I know we're a little bit kind of really pressed for time, we will see how we can relate what we built and use some JavaScript in it. Okay, so I want us to go back to our code editor. Okay, I want us to go back to our code editor, and I want us to go to our index.html. Now, in our index.html, I want us to come all the way down here, just after our section closing tag. And I want us to create a script tag. Okay, so script tag that opens and closes. Remember what we said. And this script tag is going to tell us where to look for JavaScript in our file structure. So essentially what we're looking for is a file here. So actually, before we get started on that, we'll just make a new file in the JavaScript folder and call it app.js. Okay. So make sure you have app.js in your JavaScript folder. And then as you come back to index.html, you have your script tag. Now in this script tag, it will take a couple of attributes. Okay. So we'll have our src attribute, which stands for source attribute. And what we'll do is we'll put in the link to our JavaScript file. So JavaScript, I'm not sure if it was capital or small, sorry. So we have JS and then we have app.js. So ideally you should link it to that. Now, what I want us to do also is I want us to create a button. I want us to put a button on our page, right? So just put a button and then in the middle right, click me. Once we have our button, I want us to give this button an identification unit called an ID. Okay. And then in this ID for the button is, we'll just right click me button. Okay. Just like that. So what we've added to our HTML page is we added a script tag that shows us where JavaScript is. We've added a button called the click me button. And then now we jump into JavaScript. So what you should be seeing on your page should be something of the sort. So if we go back home, you should see a click me button. As right now, it won't do anything, but we'll come to that. So one thing I want us to do on our page is I want us to open something called developer tools. So you can do this by hitting F12 on your keyboard and just coming to the console, or you can left click, go down to inspect, and it will show you the developer tools, and then just click on console. So either way will do. Okay, so we said that we want to focus on variables, functions, and control structures. I'll start off with variables. Variables are ways we can save literally things in a programming language. So if you want to save the word Andrew to a programming language and use it later on, we store it in a variable. If we want to store a function in a variable, we can do that. But in essence, variables are ways of, think of them as buckets that hold things. And we can use the things in those buckets later on in the program. So we're going to come back to our console. So just make sure your console is up and running, and we'll go back to Visual Studio Code. So what I want us to do is I want us to create just a very simple program so that we can understand how variables work. Okay. So I want us to say var a equals to 2. Now what we've done is we have initiated a variable, and this variable is called a. And what is stored in this a variable is the number 2. Okay. Now we create another variable and call it b, and we say 3. So variable b, right? The variable called b equals to 3. Now we want to see what it's like to add both of these variables, right? So we named another variable that is called c, which is a result of adding a and b. Okay. We have variable a, which is 2, variable b, which is 3, and variable c, which is a result of adding a and b. So ideally, variable c should be 5. The answer here should be 5. Okay. So what I want us to do is I want us to type in console.log c. Now, what this does is we've noticed, if we go back to our HTML page here, we've noticed when we open our developer tools, we clicked on a tab called the console, right? Now, the console is a way of us kind of checking what's happening in a program. For example, if we want to see the result of adding 2 variables together, we're able to see that on the console in the web browser. If we get errors while we're coding, we're able to see that on the console also. So everything that we do, we will see here on the console, and then we'll talk a little bit about how to come back and see it on the page. Okay, so let's go. Sorry about that. So let's go back to our Visual Studio Code, and let's make sure we save this. So on the console, we're going to be logging the variable c, which should be a result of adding 2 and 3. Let's go back to our Parsnode website where we have everything, and just reload the page. And what would you see? We should see the number 5. Okay. So just reiterating over what exactly a variable is, it's a way of just storing things, whether they're numbers, letters, floats, dates, whichever, just a way of storing things in our program. Okay. Now, if you wanted to add another number, let's say we wanted to add number 8 and 5. It would be very tedious as a programmer to come and keep changing this to 8 and 5, right? It would be very tedious, and then going back to our HTML page and reloading the page, it would be very tedious for us to get that number 13. We want to make it a way in which we can continuously get what we need. We can continuously run this piece of code that adds 2 numbers, and we can do that using functions. So functions are pieces of reusable code that we can continually use every now and then in our program. So we'll go back to our page that has our console now. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a function, okay? How we do that is we usually have the keyword function that makes sure JavaScript that understands that we're about to build a function. Then we'll call this function add a number, right? Then we'll put this and that. So let me just pause there and explain what's going on, right? Number one, we've told JavaScript that we're about to make a function, and this function will be called add number, or we can say add numbers for contextual meaning. You'll notice that I've named it in a very interesting convention. And this convention is called Camel Case, which you have the first letter of the word as a small letter, but for any new word that you introduce, has to start with a capital letter. So if I wanted to make 3 words, it would be add numbers now, for example, right? But it always has to have a new word start with a capital letter. It also does not take any spaces, so please do not put any spaces as such. You'll see errors happening in your code. Okay, so we've been able to name our function add numbers. Just let me make sure I'm sharing. Oh, sorry guys. I realized I was sharing my Google screen. But anyway, let me just reiterate about that. We start off with the keyword function, and then we call it add numbers. So as I was saying, this is a camel case. Do not put any spaces here, or else an error will be thrown. Okay, so just make sure it's one word, and it's camel case. So the next word in this name of the function should start with the capital letter. So let's add numbers now or later. Any new word that I add starts with a capital letter. Remove that for now. Now, these brackets are where I include something called the parameters of the function. The parameters of the function are whatever I need to do in the function, or whatever variables I need to pass them as parameters. We'll see that in action. So now, instead of writing all this code every time that I need to introduce a new number, all I can do is just take this and move it down here. Okay, so now we have function add numbers. What it does, it creates a variable called a variable called b, and a variable called c that adds a and b together. And then what I can do is also take this, move it from there, put it down here. So every time I run this function, it will log for me what c is. Now, the last thing that we need to do for our function to work is we need to do what we call calling a function. Think of calling a function as a way of when you have your mobile phone and you put in a number of someone that you love, or one of your friends, or one of your coworkers. For the call to go through, you have to kind of make the call and tap on the green button. for it to initiate the call. And it's kind of the same thing. You have all your functionality in a function, but it's not going to work until it's activated by calling the function. And we can easily call the function by doing add numbers. So the name of the function and then the brackets and a closing semicolon. Once we do that, the program is able to always activate this function anytime we run the program. So if we come back to our HTML page, right, and we reload, we still see the number 13, okay? But if we change our numbers, let's say we put 11 there, and we save that, and we come back to our page, our console, and we reload, then it's able to change. So it's a very easy way for us to kind of improve the functionality of a function. And as we said, functions are pretty reusable. So if we actually want to look at the reusability of a function, what we can do is we can actually just take this out. So we'll just put this outside the block. And then I want us to remove the 11 and I want us to remove the 5. So this means we can always dictate what variable A or B can be. A can be any number between 0 and infinity. B can be any number between 0 and infinity. But for us to use this in the function, then we need to pass them as parameters, as we said here. So we're going to use A and B in this function, so we need to pass them in as parameters, okay? And then what the function will do is take A and B, add them to C, and then log C. Now, what we can do as the programmers is we can define what A and B is here. Okay, actually, we don't need this, seeing that we have A and B. So we can say we want A to be 21 and B to be 56. We save that. This is a way of us trying to dictate what A and B can be. Then if we come back to our page and we reload it, we're able to see 77. Okay, so this is just to give you an idea of how functions are really relevant in our programming life. When we want to do multiple things. So if I wanted to add more than 3 numbers, maybe let's say I wanted to add 21, let's say I wanted to add 76 and 78. So I wanted to add 45 and that 24. Now, instead of kind of dictating what A and B will constantly be in this scenario, I'm able to just call the function on different kinds of numbers. So that means it's very reusable. We save that, we come back to our console, we just reload the page and we can see 77, 154, and 69. Now, I want us to talk a bit about, now we've talked about variables, we say the kind of house, what? Buckets of information, that's what they do. Now I want us to talk a little bit about control structures, and then we'll see how we can effectively use JavaScript to change something on our page. Okay. So let's come back to our function here. Okay. I I will just remove all of this. So I'll just comment it out. So when I comment it out, it means it won't run. Even if I have everything written out, it won't run. And then I'll come back here and kind of talk about control structures. Now, control structures are sort of if-else statements that say if this is true, then this happens, or if this is false, it happens. And we have three kinds of control structures. We have if statements. So we have if whatever is in the brackets, it's true, do this. And then we have if-else statements. And then we have else if statements. So I'll start off with if statements. So a simple one is if A is equals to B, or if A is, let's say if A is equals to B, then what we can do is we can go to the console and we can log say the word. So A isn't equal to B, right? That's true. So if we look at our page here, it has our console open, we reload. Here A, okay, sorry, that was an error on my part. So what we can do is we can just come back here and give variable A is equals to 2, right? Then variable B is equals to 3. Okay. So A is not equal to B. So we did not get the word true. When we come back to our page. So we'll just reload that. And we don't get anything because the statement is not true. But we come and change our code to a very truthy state. Here we go. So if we say A is equals to 2 and B is equals to 2, which is true, the console should tell us that the statement is true. So we go back to our Google Chrome and we reload the page and we see the word true. Okay. Now the next, so I'm just going to rush through the control structures using this kind of meaning. So let's change that back to 3. And then our first statement is if A is equals to B, then console log true. Now what happens if A is not equal to B? So we can say else if A is not equal to B, then what are we doing? We just take the same statement and then we will say it is false. So let's just recap this. If A is equal to B, then that's true. Else if A is not equal to B, and that's how we write not equal to, then it was false. Then else, which kind of caters for if both of these statements are not true, then we'll say I am not sure. All right, so we go back to our code. It's interesting. Then we reload. So it is false because 2 is not equal to 3, right? But if we change our code and say B is 2, which I'm doing right now, but you cannot see, and then we reload our page, we get true. Now, in the event that none of the scenarios are true, so A is not equal to B or A or none of them match, then we add. But that's a very interesting place to be. To recap, we have the variables that store information, the functions that kind of have reusability, and then the control structures, which tell us if a decision is made or if a criteria is being met, what we should do. So I want to finish off the session today by talking about DOM manipulation. DOM or DOM stands for Document Object Model. And you can think of it as kind of our HTML page here. This is a document. Anytime you hear a document in HTML or coding, just understand that it means the HTML page, okay? So the object model is kind of how you arrange on your page and your ability to target something on a page. I want us to, Nancy, I think your hand is up.
Yes, I just wanted to do a pulse check because we're slightly over time. I don't know whether we'll be able to cover the DOM manipulation during today's session.
Mm-hmm. Right. Oh, yes, I do see that we are 3 minutes to the end of our time. So I kind of, yeah. I can explain DOM manipulation, and then I think we can plan for another sort of version 2 of this. So as I said,
Okay.
DOM manipulation is the ability for JavaScript to change elements on the page. So if you come back to our code in theory website, we can see when we hover over some things that they're able to get an outline, for example. If we go all the way back to our landing section, if we do hover over a few things, they change both color and texture and opacity. The ability to do this is also very real in JavaScript. We're able to target a few things on our page, and we're able to move them around or do something to them, right? And we mostly use this by get element by the ID or the class name. So we need a few more sessions for us to understand what exactly that means and how we can move things around in our page. So I'll let Nancy maybe schedule another session with us. But there's so much more that you can, with just what you've learned now, you can make a HTML page, you can do some JavaScript, you can do so much right now. And should you want to learn a little bit more, you want to take your knowledge further. I've seen a lot of people on the chat who have been, they want to find out more about what we're doing. They want to move away from the fundamentals and they want to dive deeper into what we've done today. Nancy can definitely reference you in the right direction on our programs. So that brings us to the end of our session today. I hope there's something that you've been able to learn from HTML, from CSS, from the little JavaScript that we've done. We'll try as much as possible just to organize something else that's during your classes. But I think I can now hand it over back to Nancy.
Thank you so much, Andrew. So I think I lost connection at the end, but thank you so much. That was amazing facilitation. I really enjoyed following through, and I can see the engagement was amazing. So I just wanted to give a brief overview of how you can join us if you're interested. So we do have a software engineering class that's coming up in early November, that's November 7th. So if you've enjoyed today's session and you now can see what coding is about, I think this program is definitely meant for you. So I'll be dropping on the chat box how you can join us. And meanwhile, I think we can drop off at this point. I'll just play some music as you guys leave at your own pleasure. So I'll also send a recap email with the recording and all the resources that Andrew is going to share. So Andrew, if you don't mind, please share your LinkedIn profile as we end today's session. Thank you.
All right, Nancy, I'm putting it in the chat as you.
Your bigger bag. It's a vibe tonight. Sit back, relax. You know my people know they sleep. I got every Louis V collection from Virgil. I'm a life of fashion show, no rehearsal. DR from Kim Jones, Bottega from Daniel. I'm drinking my weed, so I'm not shaking no ass. Promise you, it's about to be back tonight. Here we go. On to the sound, DJ Big and Afrobeat Mashup 2022. It's a vibe. I wanna take a picture so this could last longer for you. Take my time, call them like precious money. I never want to hear you quiet, so I write songs for you. And I believe, yes I believe, I'm falling for you like a thief. When I see you, I see you, still the keys to your heart. Sing to me. Yes I believe, I'm falling for you like a thief. When I see you, I see you, still the keys to your heart. My baby boo, my baby boo, my baby girl, she ready. My baby wants up beside you. My baby wants up beside you. My baby girl, my baby boo, my baby girl, she ready. My baby wants up beside you. Wants up beside you. Somebody call me Vince and what's up? Pick up your chest, I swear. If you don't get money, they kill like you. When I face my fears, there's nothing I can do from here. Among the first things I make mistakes, I swear. For none of that, sacrifice my fears. And I stand right here. I say I'm better and you can't compare. Yeah, so now I do it again.